Welcome to episode 119 of the Hard Truth About B2B e-commerce. I'm your co-host Isaiah Bollinger, and I'm back with Tim. I think we missed a week, but that's because now we got night. We can see like the sun outside. We're waiting for the spring, right?
It's true. It's true. I'm doing more walk and talks now with my clients. I try to not have Zooms, and I just go out with my phone and walk around in the sunshine for a bit. I love doing that. So great to be back. It's wonderful to be here. Let me just give a couple shout outs. I have a few people to mention who are fans of ours who listen to our episodes, and they're, I hope, very happy continuing to listen. Cynthia Guang, who runs an agency out in California. Let's see, I've got Betsy Emery Martin, who I've called out before. Steve Dennis, if people know him, and Remarkable Retail, his podcast, he is a listener of our podcast. And so happy to hear that. And Darren Mass, if people know Darren Mass, who used to run Mass Communications, he is a listener. So shout out to all of them and to everybody else, and just reach out to me. I'll call you out in a future episode and tell your friends to keep listening. So I'm just going to pause now for a quick moment to allow our folks to insert the sponsor mentions, and then I'm going to throw this back to Isaiah to introduce our guest for today.
Balance is a B2B e-commerce payment solution that works well for you and for your buyers. It offers a seamless one-click checkout for almost any payment method, including ACH, wire, checks, cards, even terms. It's used by leaders in B2B e-commerce, and it's as easy as buying a shirt from Amazon. Check them out at getbalance.com. Book a session and tell them what your needs are. They are the first dedicated payment platform for B2B e-commerce, 100% tailored to your needs. Thanks again to our sponsor, Balance.
Okay, I hope that's enough time. And Isaiah, who do we have here today?
Yeah, I'm excited to introduce Matt Harris, founder of Harris Webworks. Obviously, we talked a little bit before the podcast. You've been kind of in digital for, almost 30 years now, at least 20 years, I think, based on the timeline you gave me. Give us a little bit of background on kind of how you got into e-commerce and why now it's relevant to B2B and B2B commerce.
Sure. Well, my career started in New York in 1995. I moved there from Oregon. I followed my wife, then girlfriend, to New York City. It was the last place in the world I wanted to live. But I was that much in love, love is blind. So I blindly followed her, having a degree I had a bachelor's of science degree in sculpture. Strange degree, but I was studying like engineering, math, and as my science requirements, and then just building stuff. So it was like, that was my background. I had been a cook professionally, and then I kind of lucked into an agency job while I was in Oregon at Whiting Kennedy, the agency in Portland that put like Nike on the map. Yep. So that was just a fortunate, rare, I don't know, I lucked into it. I didn't know what I was doing, but I ended up leveraging that relationship into a job doing animation. And from doing animation in New York and just trying to pay my bills, that gig ended. And they said, I said, I need more work. What do you have? And they said, do you know HTML? And I'm like, not yet. So I just went home, taught myself. This was 1995 going into 1996, and it just exploded after that. And I was going to go back to school and become an architect. And the career just took off. I was making money. I needed it because New York was expensive. Yeah. And after applying to grad school and doing the math, I was like, I'm already making more than an architect. Like, why would I
go into debt,
burn 3.5
Yeah.
years? Yeah.
Sorry to cut you off, but one of our key directors of engineering, one of our top engineers, he did this. He just started freelancing in college, and then he was like, why am I paying? I'm making more money. And then he just his career took off that way too. It was
Yeah.
just...
I have a kind of an outsider view of school in general. I mean, I have two kids. They're both, one's graduated from college and the other one's in it. So I'm not like steering my kids away from college, but I see the value of being a lifelong self-learner. And I don't necessarily think that, you know, the value you could bring to me as someone who's going to work with me is not necessarily defined by what you learn in school. It's about what you can do under pressure, learning on the fly.
I mean, our listeners have heard a lot of this, but I can relate to it. I mean, I was an artist at one point. I majored in religion in college, and you know, there was no internet, right? I mean, so I started an e-commerce business without ever having any of that experience, and that's really what I've been doing since. So it's kind of interesting how these things happen, right?
Yeah.
I love that about the industry is that it's just kind of a rag. It was in the 90s, just a ragtag.
Yeah.
One guy was a philosopher, another was a musician, another was a, you know, it's
why not, right?
Yeah, and the computer scientists were like, well, we're not sure if this internet thing is going to work. We're going to go back to COBOL, right?
Yeah.
We're going to stick in our, you know.
I mean,
and so it was all the kind of like, well, we'll try it, you know.
It seems like it's rare to meet people that you know, and actually have a computer science degree that are especially if they're in like, you know, maybe project management or creative, or they're not necessarily a developer, but they're somehow related to it, right? Because you have these like all these tangential things where it's like there's not really a degree that fits a lot of these, especially like let's say you're an e-commerce project manager, like there's no that's going to be a good fit for that, right? Like you just kind of have to learn it. Almost every project manager we have, it's like one of our best project managers, she was a teacher, and honestly, I think just being a teacher nowadays is so hard that that was like a harder job than dealing with what we deal with.
Well, I mean, like training as a component of what we do is critical. It gets overlooked all the time. And I think teaching your clients is like a huge part of our job.
That's why, because no one wants to pay for it.
Yeah.
They need it, but they don't want to budget for that. So that's what's never in the budget. You know what I mean?
You know what we found out? This is a kind of insider tip I'll give to you guys. Connecticut will pay 50 cents on the dollar for training for manufacturers.
Really?
So if you're going to do technical training, you can apply for a grant, and the state will give you 50 cents on the dollar for the training. So if you could go to your client and say, hey, listen, sign up for this grant, and then our cost for training you will be cut in half.
Wow. Yeah, I don't know how many manufacturing Connecticut clients we have, but I'm sure we've definitely worked with someone in the over there.
I mean, and I'm sure I just know Connecticut because that's where we live, but I'm thinking that other states.
Similar law, you know, manufacturing especially has a lot of fortuitous, you know, tax advantages, and, you know, obviously they want to bring more manufacturing back to the US, but that's a smart like angle to take. They just changed the R&D tax credit in Massachusetts, which we're not too happy about, by the way. Which
we still have one of those, and I haven't tried it for it yet, because we're building stuff that's geared towards, you know, B2B manufacturers, distribution companies. That's like wholesale distribution, manufacturing, mid-market, regional. That's like our target. And so we're trying to build solutions for them. And I'm thinking, well, if I could articulate it in a certain way, I might be able to get some grant money for that R&D, but I haven't tried yet.
Yeah.
Have you tried for it?
So this is just the more traditional R&D tax credit. So if you do just any R&D, and I think there's a few classifications, so it's a little gray area, like what is really R&D, but you're supposed to be able to get 10%, like kind of like a rebate on any of the costs spent. But they just changed the Massachusetts law where now it has to be amortized over 5 years. So the problem is now it doesn't count as an expense, or it's like 1/5, right? So you get 1/5 over 5 years. So you're kind of like artificially increasing your profit to get a rebate, but then you have to pay taxes on the profit now. So it's like, it's not as good if you can't expense it all in the same year.
In the first year,
you would just, whatever, it was normal expenses, and you'd potentially get 10% of that back on a credit, but and it might change again. You know how these things are by the time It's
I
all,
know.
the laws are all a mess.
Yeah, and it's an election year, so like who knows what
Yeah.
2025 is going to look like, you know?
Yeah,
Well,
exactly.
just on this topic, for our listeners, I'm going to have to remember the name or look it up during this podcast, but there is a nonprofit national manufacturers association that's basically, and it's for tech. It's for tech and manufacturing, and it tries to connect people to grants and to tax credits and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And there's an office in every single state, and I've worked with them in the past for other startups. And it's fantastic because basically they help you navigate all of this and say, well, wait a minute, here's how you apply to this for this business for that client and whatever. It's great. So they're just not well known enough. And I'm forgetting the name, so I'll have to look it up myself.
Well, we kind of cut you off, but fast forward, you got into e-commerce. Just kind of finish
Yeah, so
the trajectory.
that's where it started. That's where the craziness started, and it never ended. I just been, I've been in this for, it'll be 30 years next year. And so I'm kind of like one of the old dogs. I've raised my kids, funded them all through my own business, my own agency. But like I think I said before we started, in the late 90s, early 2000s, I went off on my own and started a flash agency. Obviously that didn't last, right? I was there for, dot bomb. If anyone remembers 2000, it was pretty bad in tech. And then, I was there for 9/11. So New York had a bad couple years there.
Yeah.
And that's when I left. Moved to Kansas City where I grew up. Took a job heading up a digital department at a production company. That company went out of business. And I started up again in like 2004. I reopened my doors, started immediately doing e-commerce. There were a couple of clients that got abandoned when this company went out of business.
Yeah.
So I was doing in 2004, I was doing Miva Merchant,
I was gonna
OS
say,
Commerce,
what was the platform? Yeah, OS.
Zen Cart.
Yeah.
You guys remember any of these?
Before, yeah, it was before Magento.
Yeah, Magento, and then
really took off
and then
08, 09, and then yeah.
And then we were like Yahoo stores, we didn't do any, but we replatformed them. Like there was a bunch of that stuff kicking
There's
around.
still like some random sites on Yahoo stores and stuff like that. Don't get me started on WooCommerce. I mean, obviously now you have a lot on WooCommerce, but
yeah, we do WooCommerce. I love open source software, so I like WordPress. I just think I like the idea of open source. I think it's kind of why I've stayed in the Magento game a little bit. Anyway, we're getting ahead of ourselves. 2006, I moved out here. I had my clients were in New York. I didn't want to raise my family in the Midwest, even though I like the Midwest. I wanted to be out on the East Coast. And then around kind of like 2011, really started getting into more e-commerce, but we were also doing this support for another agency who was doing these kind of enterprise biopharma builds on WordPress. So we got really good at WordPress for a while. And then we were still doing e-commerce kind of mid-market. And at some point I decided I was going to just pick a lane. And in around 2015, we decided to go all in on e-commerce, and particularly B2B e-commerce, because I thought that was where, as a service business, we could deliver the most value to the marketplace.
There's less competition, right? There's a lot of B2C agencies. I mean, one of the struggles we run into is like, if you're competing for a Shopify deal, it's like 8,000 bids, everyone looks the same. You're gonna, it's kind of like a race to the bottom.
And if you don't have add-on marketing services, I don't see what the benefit of a Shopify.
Yeah, I mean, there are some rare, we do run into some rare kind of large implementations where it's actually quite complex, but it's pretty rare. And then everyone wants those deals, so those deals are super competitive. But actually, it's funny you say that, because we've got a separate brand that we've been building out called GrowSpark, and it's more marketing and creative focused because it's targeting those smaller Shopify clients. We only have one developer on it, like, and he's busy, but like we don't need that much development across 15
Yeah.
clients because there's just not that much development to do. It's mostly marketing creative.
Exactly.
So creatives can go log in, do the template, like they can do a lot of the work themselves without a developer.
Well,
Yeah.
and what I worry about with Shopify is if you try to take that starter and morph it into a more robust B2B play that's integrated, and maybe you have order flow that's not purely transactional, like it's not purely credit card based.
Yeah.
Like, where does the doesn't
It's a little
Shopify just
tricky.
become incredibly expensive when you go beyond mid-market and you're
Well,
like, this is costing us too much money?
it'll be interesting. I think that they will have to develop some sort of like, if they want to be serious about B2B, some sort of like B2B payments offering. I
Right.
think it will be kind of expensive, but it'll probably work for people that maybe are heavily D2C with a wholesale component and they just want to have a little bit of wholesale. And then maybe they also, just do the rest on purchase orders through like whatever NetSuite or kind of like offline or something like that. But
Yeah.
they are gonna, I think there is, I mean, that's why most of our B2B work is on BigCommerce and Magento. BigCommerce, I think, is a lot more open and has the advantages of SaaS and Shopify, and they're not requiring to use a certain payment gateway, or they're fine with purchase. Like they are more of an order volume based pricing, and it's pretty competitive, so they don't really care how you do the payments. And then obviously Magento has just been around.
Yeah.
They've been early B2B, and I think they're still kind of the leader there. I think it's just the challenge we've run into is just it's gotten fairly expensive to maintain, Adobe Commerce, Magento sites because of just the complexity. But if you
Yeah,
can,
we're using it as a starter point to build solutions. So we'll take Magento, build a solution, and have like stuff pre-built. Like we have pre-built connectors, pre-built base themes.
yeah,
So it's e-commerce solution that happens to be leveraging Magento as the starter tech kind of
Is
thing.
that your number one like approach right now, or is it really?
That's what we're evolving into. That's what we're trying to do. Like we did a lot of projects in the last couple of years that were, custom. So you kind of a third party might come in as a creative team, and there's a distributor rebranding or whatever, and they want to have this whole new look and feel, and then you get into every single page, a component of the
yeah,
site, and you're working with a third party creative, and it's just you're just blowing so many hours on creating custom themes where you're like, guys, this is not worth it.
Yeah. Custom
You could
are expensive, and we always people kind of are sometimes shocked, like our custom theme projects, because we can do the creative and development. Our custom theme projects rarely go under on any platform, even Shopify. We rarely do them for less than 200,000. And
wow.
So, people, it's like, well, if you can't justify the ROI on that, then you probably shouldn't have a custom theme.
Yeah.
So that's like one of the first conversations I have with people. I'm like, your paths are custom theme or kind of like pre-built, like.
Yeah, I steer people away from custom all the time for this reason, right? Because you're actually not even at the high end, as you know, Isaiah.
Yeah, some are way higher, but I mean, and like I said, that's general. I mean, we've done some custom themes for less, but it's usually like 150 to 200 plus, and I'm including there's a lot of other things that go into that, but usually it's like you got to be doing tens of millions online. Like if you're doing 50 million online and we get you to 60, then it kind of makes sense. It makes a lot of sense, right?
Right.
But if you're doing 3 million, it's not worth it, or unless it's a huge company and you need the branding and there's other aspects of the site or whatever. But most companies, I think that's the challenge with B2B, and why I think you're approaching it probably correctly for most mid-market companies, is like they haven't quite figured out how to like measure or truly quantify the value of it in a lot of ways. And so you come in, I mean, and tell them it's going to be $400,000. They're like, there's just no way they can
Well, and
You
it's
know, they
also
can
like
afford that,
who,
you know.
yeah. So if it's a
I
new
know from a
lead,
lot of bids we
yeah,
where-
yeah, if it's a new lead, you're like, okay, who's who's my first point of contact in this company? It's
yeah,
oftentimes the marketing department.
yes,
But to
Yeah.
build an
or IT,
integrated
either
B2B
marketing or
solution, you got to get into operations,
yeah, yeah,
and then the business people have to, sign the check. And sometimes, so you're not even the first engagement isn't necessarily with who you need to talk to.
for sure.
Oh yeah, and that's one of the reasons I think a lot of us have learned, that even in those first meetings, I say, well, where's the C-suite? Like, where are they? Because I need to talk to them. Like I must have that
I
conversation
think
at least
that's
once.
I
You
think
know?
that's a really important point is like e-commerce, especially B2B commerce is like pretty much everything, right? It's like sales enablement, like request a quote, like it's like
Yeah,
IT operations. And I
customer
think
service.
the problem is you have a lot of C-suite people that don't want to get in the weeds. And so they say, okay, marketing people or IT. It's usually marketing or IT. Like, I think it kind of depends on like who has more power or who they like, or do they see it as more of a marketing project or more of an IT project? And then they go get me a bunch of bids. And sometimes like we can't even talk to these people. So the
Mhm.
people actually making the decision, writing the check, isn't having the honest conversations and getting the nuances. Because like I think if you don't have, these hour-long conversations through the podcast, or because you get lost in the nuances. They never understand, are they buying a custom theme or a pre-built theme? Do they even need a custom theme? Should they be fine with more pre-built stuff? I think often they don't even really know what they're buying. You know what I mean?
No,
They're like,
yeah.
we need B2B commerce. So, hey, marketing person, go figure it out. Give me some bids.
Well, they
Yeah.
often, like, the C-suite guys don't understand data. They
Yeah.
don't necessarily like understand what dirty data means. Data
Yeah.
normalization, like, what does that mean? Like, we got brought in on a deal we're working right now. They needed a PIM system.
Yep.
And so they showed us and they evolved. Like, that's the other thing, like legacy plays a role in this, because you inherit all this data, and
Yeah.
you also inherit dirty data, and you inherit complex and business rules that you have to map to in B2B. But then we're looking at these attribute tables, right, for product data, which are part product, part service. So it's very complex. And you have to have values associated with each one of these to bill. And that there's like tiered and wholesale pricing baked in. That's also like per product, per customer. Point being, it's like got a lot of complexity to it. There's an efficiency gain to kind of wrap your head around this and build processes to streamline and automate this for scale. But it's really hard to explain that to somebody who's not already kind of in the
Well,
weeds
I
with
think
this stuff.
that part of the problem is that these B2B businesses continue to operate mildly successful. I mean, I wouldn't say that many of them are growing 50% a year, right? But maybe there's some outliers, but they've been able to sustain themselves through manual sales, right? And so their sales reps go out, they manually do things. And so when you're doing everything manually, you can get away with bad data because the data doesn't matter. Like everything's just manually inputted into the ERP or whatever. And they just haven't ever really needed, they've never had to rely on good data, or it's never
Yeah,
been
or automation.
for
Yeah.
automation.
Yeah.
I think what will be interesting to see is what level of pressure this starts to put on these, like we kind of saw it with retail, right? Like Toys R Us, right? The retail businesses kind of like died that didn't, evolve in this way. I don't think it's like quite hit B2B yet in that same way, but I do think there will become like a tipping point where if you're just so not automated, like do you just become too inefficient to compete, right? And
Yeah.
that where do we
Yeah.
see that tipping point? I think we're starting to maybe see some of the beginning of that, but it's like it's a slower kind of drawn out process. Yeah.
And also I think Matt, you touched on this just before we started recording too, but this generational
Yeah.
shift, is really causing a lot of dramatic things to happen. And one of those is expectations have changed, right? I think that's a big thing that I always use to kind of summarize what's happening. It's like, I now expect as a consumer for things to happen in the way the best B2C companies do things, like how quickly, how can I track my product, like all these sorts of things. And if you can't do it for B2B, it's like, well, why can't you, right? So it becomes a very strange, accelerated conversation that didn't used to happen even 5 years ago, I think.
Well, I think you're going to see three different types of pressure. And you have the public companies like the big, or whatever, let's call it the enterprise, right? And they're doing this fast, right? Like Granger, I mean, Amazon B2B, like Wayfair B2B, like these big companies are building these like Staples has a B2B pro, like they're building these automated, they're data-driven enterprise companies, right? And so some of that's going to push down, and I forget who, I think it was our friend at Deloitte Digital. So they do like the biggest B2B stuff, and a lot of the money and the way that they're getting valued is based on like their level of automation. So it's kind of forcing them to invest all this money. So there's going to be this downward pressure from those guys. And then we're also seeing on the private equity side, private equity, they see this opportunity, they see all this manual stuff, and they're going to come and buy everyone and try and roll them up into a more automated business. I think they underestimate and make a lot of mistakes, but they're throwing money at it. And then the family-owned businesses in B2B, which is still, I don't know, maybe the bulk of them, right? Or at least the sheer number of them, they're gonna, like, some are gonna have to face this downward pressure. So it'll be kind of interesting to see how they handle it, because they're kind of competing against these private equity enterprise automation, tailwind.
The way I see it is that there's a massive mid-market B2B regional business opportunity that has been kind of under modernized.
Yes.
And that there's this ownership class that's aging out. We're like at peak boomer retirement right now. And this group is actually still in control of these businesses. And if they haven't, they either modernized before they hand it off and kind of change some of their processes, or private equity is going to come in and bundle them with a bunch of other buys. And you're going to see a ton of disruption in the next 10 years.
You've been through this before, like
I've seen it
play out for 30 years.
This photo, that's my grandfather's manufacturing plant in Indiana.
Yeah.
That was thriving in the 50s and 60s.
Sure.
It's gone now.
Yeah.
So
what did he make? I can't quite tell.
He made parts for Detroit.
Wow.
So did my other grandfather. I come from two grandfathers that both own their own manufacturing companies in Indiana.
Actually, both of mine own manufacturing businesses as well. It's funny, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So this is kind of where my heart is at. So this is what I see. There's companies that are going to get smart about this, and there's agencies that are going to get smart about it, and they're going to help these companies make the transition over the hump, right? And get into the game and play the game and get all the advantages of, technologies and new strategies and marketplaces, et cetera, right? And that those small businesses represent a lot of times small communities. If you save the small businesses, you can save the small communities. If private equity comes in and buys them up, there's a problem there, because I think they'll bundle these businesses and start chopping.
And they're going to also sell it again. The whole point is bundle it. They're not going to hold this company for 30 years. They're going to sell it back to Granger, whatever, and so, or the next product, it's a buy play.
Yeah.
There are two choices then, right? I mean, either you modernize quickly enough so you can avoid like the PE situation, or you take the money from the PE buying you out and start something that begins in the right place, right? That's kind of the way I've talked to people.
It's a little scary though, because I think that, to your point, there's like kind of this mass potential consolidation coming that is a lot of the economy that's going to kind of like disappear, but not disappear, but it'll still be the economy, but it'll be very different.
But
and this is the way I look at it as an agency. I want to help the small businesses not get bought out and chopped. I want to see them thrive and grow and expand, and maybe there's some consolidation. But I think in terms of like, if we understand how to do it, if we understand the nuts and bolts of like the pieces that you need to build a composable kind of integrated solution for these businesses, we're going to be fine. As an agency, we're going to thrive. I'm worried about our clients that don't see the need to invest.
Yeah. Or they're not even your clients. They're the ones that
right,
they're the ones that didn't hire you,
That's
like,
right.
It's like, yeah. So
the ones who got sticker shock and walked away. Those
exactly,
are the ones.
right. I mean, I feel like I still run into those, we do a lot with Infor. We just kind of fell into this Infor distribution market with we have a partner that only does Infor. So we built kind of a very specialized connector with them. And so there's this niche of these people that use Infor distribution ERP, and they're very much that family-owned distributor. Some are large, but it's a lot of what you're saying. And
do you think that the Infor core tech is future-proof?
The kind of the CSD or the cloud suite kind of thing?
Yeah.
I think it's going to be I think there's problems with it. It's just going to be a slow grind.
There's still a lot of Infor on-prem stuff out there.
Yeah, exactly. Like, I think once they get everyone over to Cloud Suite and they can truly invest all their money and stop supporting like they're kind of already stopped, like it'll be a better solution, but it's going to be a long, probably another 3 to 5 years of just getting everyone, maybe even more than that, to get it onto the cloud.
We have the same thing, but it's Epicor.
Yeah, so very similar with Epicor, right? And so, but I'm sure you've had these conversations with some of these people where like they get sticker shock, they don't want to do anything, they never build the Magento site, or they go with I see these guys like they'll go with like I don't know if you've heard of it, Bill Trust Commerce, like things that like it's like a payment gateway that like has some kind of like starter kit. Things that are they're not competitive solutions. You know what I mean? Like you're not gonna get anywhere with those kind of solutions. And it's like, are those the guys that are gonna die off in 10 years because they never kind of built the modern infrastructure to automate? And I think it's the bottom 50% of orders, right? Like maybe the top enterprise orders, like, yeah, you're gonna have like sales reps and stuff, but you're doing $1,000 order over the phone. Like it's really not very economical. Like you should be processing those, anything under $5,000 should probably go through the website.
I mean, one of the parallels I often bring up is that B2B companies are often really progressive in talking about product development, right? So they'll be working on the latest version of whatever it is that they manufacture, whatever it is that they sell, but they're not applying that same sort of innovation, mindset to all of the infrastructure, to everything that has to happen behind the scenes, to what the latest is that they could be doing to advance their business. And so I think that conversation has also been very, very helpful. I mean, because nothing's future proof. Let's just be honest.
Yeah, right.
Term future proof. I've used it myself on and off for a long time, but there's nothing future proof. I mean, people were blacksmiths 100 years ago. Is anybody a blacksmith today? Right?
It's some hipsters in Brooklyn. I mean,
I think it's more about
hipsters in Brooklyn. That's right. That's about it.
It's more about being scalable and nimble, right? From a growth, agility perspective, and you have to have some of that kind of ability to progress and modernize digitally. One of the companies that we're working with that I think is they're family owned, they're investing huge amounts of money into upgrading to NetSuite off their ERP and full digital I know we hate the word digital, but we're doing the branding, full new kind of custom, better e-commerce experience. It's a lot. They're really going like all in. One thing I've noticed is it's all being run by the younger. I want to say these guys are probably like in their 40s. They have the same last name. Like they have so it feels like maybe they're not the CEO, but it feels like the company, maybe the boomer leadership is smart to say, hey, look, we know we got to do this. Hey guys, go, like you have the power, you get the budgets. go figure it out. And I think to your point, like some of the ones that are kind of holding on and not really empowering like the next generation or someone to go do that on their behalf are going to potentially fall way
Yeah.
behind.
But you know,
Yeah.
I'm gonna just say something a little counter to what we said too, just to kind of put it out there. But you know, it's not just the boomers, right? I mean, I continually meet with people who are not boomers, who are younger or
Sure. Yeah,
just
I agree.
kind of stuck in some way or some mindset or something, and I don't know why, right? You know, it's safe, you know, or some other reason that they're telling themselves, but. You know, I don't want all of our listeners to come to us who are boomers and say,
No, I mean, some of it are just sales reps or people that have been in the B2B industry. And I guess
Yeah.
it's like, do they just not believe that this kind of online buying cycle is going to ramp up as much as it is? I'm just curious, Matt, what you think is kind of holding these people back from making these investments.
Well, I think
Changes,
I
right?
think it's this idea of, so I went out to lunch with one of my clients who we've had a really great run. Like his business is growing like crazy. We did a lot of great work for him. And we were joking about, business. We were talking about the evolution of business and how you have to constantly be looking for incremental improvements. You can't just stay static and expect things to stay the same and that the value will be the same. Like you can't, the value you get out of doing something 1 year can start to diminish year 2, year 3. So you have to keep looking for ways to improve, right?
Sure.
And so the joke was, what's the last thing the business owner says before he locks up and closes forever? But we always did it this way.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So there's a reluctance, and I think that, like, for me, there's owners that have, and business leaders that have kind of an entrepreneurial spirit, and they want to try things out. They want to try to improve things. And I think there's other business owners that are just, well, they're resistant to change the way they've done things because it's worked so far. And they're a little bit suspicious of us tech guys, man. They
Yeah.
don't like us.
Yeah.
I've seen a lot of that where they're like,
Everybody loves me, Matt.
Yeah.
Loves
I think they're suspicious of the technology and the marketing people, and I
yeah,
think they don't understand it. It's all kind of smoke and mirrors, like SEO. I started out in SEO, so it's like, oh, we're gonna do some SEO for you. Like you can't get. It's
it
a
was
very
like snake oil. Yeah, and then there's a
yeah,
lot of like sharks in the water. So
yeah,
like you've seen people selling BS, and
yeah,
we sometimes get lumped in with them. And
yeah,
then the market is like, they think of like Amazon and they think that these are the kind of, that these are the people that are going to put us out of business. And it's like, no, this is just the way things have been changing, and it's going to just continue to change. So you have to kind of, keep your systems evolving and your processes. And
How much do you think is also what we see is just there's a lack of sophistication of just upgrading, like you said, on-prem, these old back office systems. Some of these guys that have been upgraded their ERP in forever. And like just even their base operations is so archaic. Like they have to upgrade all of that before they can even really do a good e-commerce, B2B
absolutely,
website, because you can't get any data out of it. And, because we see a lot of that as well, where it's like,
tons of that.
yeah.
Yep.
Tons of it.
Can you name anyone who's doing everything right? You know,
No.
I mean, and again, I'm not even saying that to be snarky. I mean, in a way,
Oh,
even the people I really like a lot, they still are struggling with some aspects of their business, or
I think you have to look at people that have digitized a lot of the operations, like a Granger or somebody. They're not necessarily.
I mean, they're
They,
amazing, spend tons of money.
they have flaws, right? They have major issues, but they have these digital programs that do work and bring in millions, in some cases billions of dollars, right?
Well, I think they've done a lot of acquiring too, Granger, right?
Yeah.
Like,
Yes.
so I think if you're that big and you have deep pockets, you can learn through acquisition, because you might buy a company that's doing something in a very intelligent way,
Yeah.
an efficient way, and you can inherit that and spread it throughout all the other, divisions. And, I think that And frankly, like you brought up Deloitte, the public companies, the big enterprise companies, they have consultants that know what's going on.
Oh, for sure. These guys are, yeah.
Yeah,
I mean,
they're not idiots. They're reading, they're researching, they're running, they have case studies, they've seen improvements, they can talk about it. So what I worry about is all the, mid-market companies that are living in a bubble and they
yeah.
don't see how the world around them's changing.
And they're growing 3% a year, they're flat. But at
Right.
some point, it's like you take a couple 20% dips, because, your competitors start calling your customers and saying, hey, I got this online program, let me sign you up. I'll get you into our digital program. It's way more efficient. I can get you a better price. It's a kind of a death spiral pretty quickly, I think, for some of these guys,
I'll give you an example. So a company came to us about 4 or 5 years ago and they said, we've been trying to build this B2B portal for our business. They're on Microsoft Great Plains.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, so it's
legacy year, they're gonna have to upgrade.
yeah, so we want to be able to push the orders into Great Plains.
Yeah.
We've spent 3 years trying to build this and it's not live. We never got it to work. Can you come in and help us? And so we looked at it, brought in a partner, got it working, whatever. But the point is at the initial engagement, they said, so our buyers are, contractors. They're guys in pickup trucks, they're building stuff. They don't really want to order online. They just want to pick up the phone and call, customer service and put their orders in, like the way they always have. So they had like 6 different catalogs they would ship out, and
Yeah.
people would look in the catalog and call on the phone. They were still doing it this way 4 or 5 years ago. And the management team was like, we'll be lucky to get 10, maybe 15% buy-in to use the portal. We built the portal. Year 1, they got to 90%, like that.
Sure.
Everyone started using it. And they're like, oh, I didn't know they were going to use it. And it's like, it's faster. It's easier.
Yeah.
They can do it whenever they want.
Why aren't people calling Amazon?
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
People don't realize it's like you don't want to have to call and tell them your credit card every time or
Yeah.
tell them your purchase order account number. Like that stuff can be saved in your account. So when you go back to order again, it's super efficient.
Totally.
Or
requisition lists, all that stuff. Yeah, it makes it
literally,
easier
we're saying the same thing. You can build these, wish. I think it's almost better call them B2B wish lists, whatever, requisition.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
There's just so much potential automation. And yeah, I think your point is that they're kind of underestimating the potential to get these. And I think, but also it's another important point is like, we see that too, where it's like, oh, we failed, it was hard to integrate with Great Plains or whatever. And it's also because I think you need multiple different experts. So like, generally, if we approach something like Great Plains, we would be like, okay, who's your Great Plains, IT, like who's working on your ERP? And a lot of times when you dig into that, they don't really have an internal expert, or the internal expert kind of knows, but not that much. And then they're not really happy with their ERP vendor. So like, they don't really have a technology strategy, like they're kind of like.
Well, and the technology experts are going to leave when they see the technology's failing. Like when they see abandonment, everyone, like the tech guys abandoned before the clients. They're like, I'm not going to keep working on GP forever. This is not, I don't have a career path here.
I got to go find a client that's willing to upgrade to 365 and I'll take a job somewhere where they'll invest in the upgrade to 365 so I can keep my career going, because it's all going to be.
We're constantly trolling the internet trying to find somebody who's like an expert on Eclipse. You can't find them.
That Epicor.
Yeah, Epicor bought them out. It was a distribution software. Yeah, exactly.
I mean, we see, to your point, we see people on Infor-Fax, right? Which is it's the kind of the same kind of thing, where it's like there's not even an upgrade path. You have to just like
you have to abandon it.
And so.
And then Epicor, one of those companies will be like, we'll go to our cloud. And then the clients think, well, we're just going from Epicor to Epicor, not realizing that
just press the button.
Replatforming to this cloud software is the same as going to NetSuite. It's the same amount of work.
Literally basically as much work as going to NetSuite, or at that point, I would say go do an evaluation, go look at NetSuite, Dynamics 365, Acumatica, whatever. Go look at the top 5 cloud providers
Yep.
I do think though that the small businesses, mid-market businesses that can effectively get to a good cloud ERP will have a major advantage.
Totally.
And they will, I mean, we're seeing some with Acumatica where Acumatica's invested quite a bit into a pre-built connector for Shopify and BigCommerce.
What's the deal with them in Shopify?
So the connector is decent. I mean, it's not, you know how these connectors work. Like they're never gonna like be perfect and they're always gonna have problems. But like if you're just trying to get started, you could have a starter version of a B2B site on Shopify or BigCommerce. The connector for both BigCommerce and Shopify, and it would work okay.
But there's a relationship there between
Yeah,
those
so
two.
they're building it directly. Like Acumatica engineers are working with Shopify engineers.
Oh,
And which it
that's
allows
smart.
them, and same thing with BigCommerce. And so it allows them to go a little bit deeper into the data, going back to the data problem. They're okay, let's make sure price lists. Like I was very skeptical that price lists would work, and it seems to work. And
Well,
so
that might be their B2B play right there.
yeah, exactly. So there are these like, and you see like with the iPaaS solutions, I don't know if you ever worked with like Celigo or any of those kind of guys, right? I
Yeah,
mean, they're big with NetSuite, right? And
yeah,
so, but
we know Celigo.
if you
Yeah.
work with any of the iPaaS solutions, generally they have integrations for like Microsoft 365 or Acumatica or NetSuite. But if you ask them, oh, I need an integration to Eclipse, they have nothing.
Yeah.
There's nothing.
Yeah.
So the advantage I see for these people that get to these cloud ERPs is they have, you know, they can go evaluate 5 iPaaS solutions that all have a potentially viable pre-built connector to a good e-commerce platform, and they don't have to build from scratch because everyone's building for these cloud solutions, right? And so
Yeah.
you're going to have way easier time building things than being stuck on whatever Great Plains. I think we worked on Nav or Great Plains and it was a nightmare. Like it took
Navision. We have another one on Navision. They're upgrading to
yeah.
365.
Yeah, I mean, part of what I would say though is that it does all circle back to mindset, right? I mean, I know we talk about that a lot, but a lot of these companies why are they using these particular ERP solutions, right? That's also in my long career lifetime. They probably
So why haven't they upgraded, I guess?
yeah, but you think about like what did they move from in order to get the ERP that they're in? You know, and then did they think that it was just never going to change, that they were going to sit there and for 30 years
Yeah.
it would be the same? Like it's a bizarre mindset. Like, why would you think that?
I'm
right?
curious if you've noticed a pattern with your clients or just prospects of the ones that are upgrading or have upgraded versus the ones that haven't. Are they more kind of ahead or they're thinking further ahead? Like, are you noticing anything like that?
I'll answer first, then we could throw this to Matt. But the people I've worked with, even ones that I've come back to, there are clients I've now worked with 3 times over the course of like a long career, right? I've come back in different stages. And the companies that kind of question everything and say, well, what is the appropriate update schedule? When can we invest in this? How does that fit with our new vision for X, right? For our warehousing, our logistics, our retail, our distributors, when they ask those questions all the time, they're going to be fine. They may have maybe they waited like a year too long or something, but they're still doing it, right? They're still moving forward. The ones that really don't have those conversations where you have to come in and throw cold water in their face and say, why aren't you thinking about these things? Those are the ones that really are having the issues because they're going to come to a complete halt. They'll hit something that is a huge roadblock and they won't be able to get out of it easily, right? So, that's kind of the way I would put it. The ones who really have the conversations and say, all right, what do we do in the next 3 years? Are we going to do something with X? Are we going to? That's the ones who are actually make it.
I think with each one of these relationships, you have to maintain a roadmap, and that roadmap is constantly. So there's going to be back burner stuff, but you have to keep reminding them. And to your point, Timothy, if they remind you, it's even better. Like if they're engaged in that way. But we always talk about how there's your stakeholder, who's an advocate for change, who's probably the person that brought you in. And then there's gatekeepers who are resistant to change because they see it as job security or whatever their motivations are. There's gatekeepers who are resistant to change in the organization. And it's like you've got to empower and embolden the partner stakeholder, and you have to get even closer to the gatekeeper, and you have to try to make that person part of the solution. Involve them if you can.
And, I'll give you, and I'll name the company because I have no risk in this at this point. What the company I'm mentioning that I've been back to like 3 times is Vitamin Shop, right? So I actually worked on their strategic plan many, many years ago, right? And this, of course, there is a B2B component, even if people don't realize that, private label and all this other stuff happening, but mostly B2C. But the lesson's still there because what happened is that they had forgotten the plan. There were leaders who didn't want to go along with the plan. Then leaders left and others had to remind them that the strategic plan was there so that the new leaders would jump on it, right? It was just this is how change is, right? People come and go, priorities change, there's new investors. And it took forever to kind of circle around to what they wanted to do 12 years ago, right? But they finally did.
I guess what I have a theory or thesis is on is the companies that are proactive about getting to like a more modern ERP, cloud ERP, or whatever. Maybe it's cloud enabled, right? They're like in AWS, I don't know. It depends on what it is, right? But are most likely going to be much further ahead and have a much easier time innovating with B2B e-commerce because they're going to have access to these modern updating APIs, and they're going to have a much easier time in this digital transformation than the ones kind of stuck on Epicor clips for another 10 years.
Yeah.
And
I think those businesses are going to be at risk. I think
that's kind of what I'm getting at. Like, what is with your crystal ball of 10 years, is that going to be one of the,
I think that, and it also is indicative of a mindset that is also inhibiting them. Like the fact, there's the software that's inhibiting him, but it's also the fact that they're still on that software is indicative of a mindset, right? So that's the two things. So there has to be some kind of so I guess from like our perspective as an agency owners, how do you build that trust? And one of the things that I have seen, and this is kind of part of my talk and one of the presentations I gave, is try to simplify the initial engagement build to something that's easy to deliver, easy as possible to deliver, and represents value and win. And then and then talk roadmap right off the bat. So you have like phase 1, phase 2, phase 3. But if you can, try to get an easy win early and demonstrate value early on in the engagement. And then you can slowly kind of keep planting those seeds. But I think it's like you guys have said, I think on some of the other podcasts, this is not necessarily going to happen year 1 of the engagement. This could happen year 3 of the engagement, which we've seen, year 4. But as long as you keep helping them, and encourage them to make these investments, you're going to see winners. And I do think like there's a market for agencies that do the consulting role with mid-market for these businesses that can't afford Deloitte. They can't afford this, Accenture, but
I mean, I think one of the challenges that agencies like us are going to run into, and we maybe need to get more, smart with networking, is this, and I keep coming back to this ERP thing, helping them navigate their back office kind of plans. Because you could build the best front end in the world, but if you can't get accurate pricing or inventory or kind of like, let's say, multi-warehouse location inventory, so where like you're going to hit a limit, right, or a wall to what they can do. And I think
you also you can't really see into your business in terms of what's going well.
Exactly.
Where where you're profitable, so that like we just did a NetSuite implementation for a client that was on like desktop accounting software, and we put him on NetSuite, and he had built a pretty robust system, but he has 145 micro websites, micro stores that we built for him. And then he doesn't sit on any inventory. The inventory goes to the suppliers and the shared inventory. But when someone through one of those stores makes an order, an API goes out to his supplier, and they can have that product there that day if they get it in before like noon, and he can have it in his production facility that day, the next day, and out the door. So they can do branded apparel. They do like apparel for franchises.
See, but
anyway,
that's
once we updated him to NetSuite and he got those reports, he's like, oh my gosh, I've never had this visibility on my business before.
Yeah.
I've never been able to see all the parts.
What's really going on. But that's a great story. I think the challenge for e-com, agencies is it's hard to have enough influence on all of that, right? You can't be a Microsoft Dynamics implementer, NetSuite implementer, and you know what I mean? There's just too many ERPs and too much nuance within them. And so you kind of have to have these partnerships with these folks, but they're hard to make. I mean, we've tried to build relationships with them, and they're hard. Like, I also find that ERP people aren't necessarily always so excited to partner with someone like you or me.
No.
We've
solved that problem. Yeah. Well, we became an ERP. Like we're certified in NetSuite now. So we went through that whole thing, which was quite a different world, man. It's So anyway, but we love NetSuite for what it can do for our clients, and it's a great platform. But one of the things you asked before, like, what's keeping these businesses from making this decision? And if it doesn't take much searching on Google to find out that 60% of ERP implementations fail.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So there's something to be reluctant about, right? So you're talking a lot of money, a lot of time, a lot of disruption, and then nothing.
Long tail ROI, like it's probably multi-year ROI. Like they're probably not going to get ROI for at least 2 years, in most cases.
Right. Part of the answer is what you said, Matt, about the word investment, right? I mean, I always come back to investment too. Like you said, like, how does this work? And, for the consulting I do on my own, and for my agency partners and all these other things, the clients I go to, we're always talking about investment. We're always talking about like a short-term win, as you said. Like, how are we, if we're going to invest $400,000 or whatever it is, like pick a number, then how are we going to justify this? What's going to happen? I was like, all right, we're going to do this first because this is going to get you X number of dollars, or accelerate this, or increase your profit, or whatever, right? It's going to be one of these categories of things. That's kind of the way that the argument has gone, best, I would say, with a lot of these folks, is that there's got to be a clear understanding of why it's an investment, not just an expense. All right. Yeah. That's a key thing.
Have you heard about this like suffocation strategy? So it's a horrible term, but it's like, I've heard it called, but the idea is like you have this monolithic on-prem ERP that's running everything, right? Yep. And you've got to eventually modernize that thing, or this is, potential existential problem here. So what you do is you replace components slowly. So it's like might take 2 to 3 years, but you do something that's easy first, and you're like, okay, it's not doing that function anymore. That's a cloud function now. We're going to do this cloud function now. So eventually you strip apart the pieces and you go to some kind of headless thing, or what, like this is that composable model. And eventually, it's just doing the accounting, or it's just doing the inventory, or whatever at the end. And then you just pop that out, and then you're done.
Yeah. The problem though that I see with the composable model is, I think in a lot of ways it's great, but people haven't thought out what the purpose of all these systems are. So they end up with they have a bunch of redundant systems, which is part of what you see in e-commerce in general, right? they're taking orders for e-commerce, but really the orders live in ERP. Then they're like, oh, now we have a PIM. And then they have all these apps. And the next thing you know, they have like 20 systems that all kind of like overlap. But composable can solve that if you're smart about it, but I just don't think enough people kind of like map it. They don't really do the
Yeah.
art to map that out.
And it's not like the monolith is wrong. I think in some instances, like, like each case is different. And a smaller business, I think you're going to want more of your stuff in a single system.
They can't really afford or handle the complexity of the composable solution yet. At least for now. Maybe I think there'll be ways that it gets, more plug and play, but I don't think it's just not quite there yet.
Another option that I've seen that's worked quite nicely, is really you're kind of building in parallel, or you build, the magic island is what I've called it. You're building something new for a piece of your business, and then once everyone sees that piece works so beautifully, then that's when everything kind of goes over to it. And that happened with a B2B B2C teacher supply company that I'd worked with. It's all school supplies, for home-based schools, for educational institutions from, pre-K all the way up through college. That's all it does, right? So they took like a piece because they have separate environments for each of these different levels. Like here's for college administrator, facility planners, whatever. And then they have the pre-K ones. So they pick one, right? And they made everything connected to that one, the new systems, the new everything. And once it worked, it's like, okay, we'll do that. Let's do it.
Actually, composable in theory is really good concept for B2B companies, because they potentially have so many different like isolated functions, right? Like, but I think they struggle to handle the architecture of that from what I've seen. Like, have you guys have you gotten many people to headless or composable? Like most of ours, I'd say the ones that we've gotten, they're generally companies with tech teams, or they have a component. They're a little bit more, kind of modern.
We're working on a headless solution with another agency right now. We're kind of partnering with them on it. And, PWA, Progressive Web Apps, was the kind of go-to headless solution for Adobe. And, it had a lot of dev expense to go that direction.
Yeah.
And I don't think there were a couple years ago, there weren't a lot of really great case studies that I had heard about where that process went really well. But I've also learned to kind of trust the visionaries. I've been in this game long enough that it's like some people are right, they're just early, so you kind of have to wait it out. Like, I think headless is going to have a major part to play in the ecosystem. I think it's already there now. I think some of the big companies, like you said, that have tech teams are managing it in-house or through a partner. But I think it's going to start to go down market. And because of the like the simplicity and elegance of what it could be, seems to have a lot of value down the road. And I think it's going to start to go down market.
Yeah, I agree. I know you're not doing much with BigCommerce, or have you looked into BigCommerce at all?
We've looked into BigCommerce, and we didn't, we're in discussions with them. I'm also in discussions with Shopware. So
yeah, I like the Shopware. I
listened to that podcast. By
the way,
Shopware,
I mean, they're open source, so they kind of, I think the challenge we're seeing with Shopware is just like, it's hard enough to sell yourself as an agency in general, but trying to sell something that like people don't really know that well in the United States is tough, right? It makes it tough. But I would check out Catalyst on BigCommerce. I think you might find that pretty interesting. They just launched an open source reference architecture. It's kind of like a speed/starter kit for headless on BigCommerce. And then they also acquired MakeSwift, which is like a visual editor for headless or Next.js. So you could pretty much spin up like a headless kind of storefront in a matter of minutes with drag and drop MakeSwift.
Yeah, I just picked a weird year to try to get into BigCommerce. 2023 was like, we were basically just living off of existing. We didn't get a ton of leads in 2023.
Yeah,
we got stuff coming in now, but we had enough foundation, to kind of live on that, and so we didn't. No one was really looking to re-platform. That was I had, we had a couple that we were thinking about replatforming over, but they didn't want to make the investment. And, you know, BigCommerce wasn't going to give us any leads, and I didn't really want to start
because you gotta
selling
get them
ourselves.
business. I mean, that's the hard part with these new partners, right?
Yeah,
They're like,
exactly. So it was like, okay, I see the value here and I want to do it, but, you know, something has to come in that
yeah,
makes sense for us and makes sense for BigCommerce for us to do it together. I'm thinking that's going to happen this year, and I like Shopware because I feel like, just from talking to them and hearing about it, the salesman approach thing that they're doing, which I don't want to learn more about that, like that integration with sales teams platform that he was talking about in the podcast. I was like, if that's what I think it is, that's really interesting to me, and I think it might have some value. And then the fact that it's PHP and open source, I'm like, well,
I think honestly,
I know we could build on that tomorrow.
I think the code
That's
base
our core.
is pretty good. Like it's a cleaner, kind of easier code base to manage than some of the other platforms from what I've seen. But it's an adoption. I think that some of the problems with technology is, even though a technology is better, doesn't mean everyone's going to adopt it. You
Totally.
know, and so I mean, you
100%.
see that with like Microsoft, right? Microsoft's just, they're so in the enterprise, they can get away with like kind of a slightly worse product, but they have the ability to penetrate the markets, and that has almost more power than a better product.
Well, they have the ecosystem, and they can
Yeah.
train people on the platforms, and they're, you know, yeah, the relationships are already, yeah, exactly.
So we're seeing something similar. I mean, I think a lot of people kick the can down the road in 2023. I think this will be an interesting year, the next year and a half, of like, you can't keep kicking the can down the road forever, right? Because not everyone's doing that. And so, you know, I'm sure you're kind of starting to see people start to pick up the conversation again.
Yeah,
now.
definitely.
Busy for me. I have to tell you, those conversations accelerated as soon as we started the new year. And so people have been really busy and trying to figure out when they're going to budget things, how they're going to stuff it into the schedule. You know,
Well, here's what I think is going to happen is everyone's going to finally make a decision, like they always do, by May, June, July. Wait too long, you know, they take too long, and then they're like, oh, we got to get this done by like September, October.
Yeah, can you have this up for Q4? And you're like, it's Q3, guys.
Timeline
It's
becomes
Q3.
impossible. And then also all the agencies are going to get bombarded, and agencies have been very conservative because we've gone through practically 2 years of a harder market. So
Yeah,
it's not like people have this giant bench just sitting around, because you can't afford
no.
that. And so everyone's going to get bombarded at the same time, and they're not going to be able to get their projects done. So
you know,
this is basically advice to people to start now while people still have bandwidth.
holiday 2024 is right about now, baby. You know, that's kind of what I'm saying to people. It's like, you know, just right now. It's
I have a feeling we're going to get a lot of calls in like September, October, November, like end of next year, of like, yeah, our project's like way behind timeline. We need help, like kind of like desperation calls, trying to figure out how to not get fired for not hitting their deadline. You know what I mean?
We've seen some. Have you ever gotten like a year-end investment dump? Like they're like,
yeah. We've gotten some.
Yeah.
Happens. It's, you know, I work with a lot of investors, actually. As part of what I do is I work with the investors and I review business plans and set up business plans, whatever, right? And a lot of the money comes in those weird chunks where it's like, oh, it's going to arrive on October 1st. And it's like, we have to do X in this year. And it's like, why is it arriving on October 1st, guys? You know, it really makes everyone scramble in weird ways that they don't necessarily, they shouldn't. Let's just put it that way.
Yeah.
You know?
It's gonna be an interesting year. I think it'll be fun though. I think it'll end up being a good year for, I hate that I have to say digital transformation or B2B e-commerce digital transformation. We need to like coin a new word for that.
There's not another word. I'd use it.
Yeah.
I agree with you.
We'll use it for now.
I think this is going to be a big year, and it's going to be a pivotal year in which you're going to see some of the winners emerge and make momentum and get more adoption, maybe finish some of their projects or undertake bigger, like, and I think going in the next year in 2025, you're going to see some of those results play out. Like the beginning of kind of what you're saying, this 10-year cycle is going to start to play out, where the guys that made the right investments are going to start kind of chipping away faster, and the guys that are kind of slowly not, you know, they're going to start to feel it more and more.
And I think you need to, the smart companies are going to maintain partnership with an agency. It makes a lot of sense. Like, I think the world's changed that much in the last 20 to 30 years, where if you're going to stay relevant in a technological standpoint, you need to have eyes on the ground that are outside of your organization,
For
that are
sure.
looking at lots of different examples of what's
Yeah.
working on in the, yeah.
And I think that a mistake that I see with these B2B companies is they try and, do too much in-house sometimes. And then, they're just really not very efficient. They can't manage these people very well. They're not really on top of all the latest things. And like you said, they'd probably be better off with maybe a smaller, higher end internal team that works with third parties, right? Like
Yeah.
maybe get some more expensive talent, smaller team, and then they go out and kind of curate the right solutions versus
Yeah.
trying to kind of have this internal team do too much.
Yeah.
It's just really not.
I see like fractional CIO stuff happening
Yeah.
too. Like, yeah.
Which I think
I
is
think
smart.
that,
I think a lot of these guys probably can't afford a full-time CIO, or if the one that's good, and they should, maybe have some sort of mix of a fractional CIO with an agency, and that can be a really good model, I think, to do.
Fractional
Yeah.
roles are rocking right now. I'm in two right now. I'm a fractional CEO of two companies, and I've been a CDO and a CMO also. So it's a very valid,
Yeah.
role
yeah.
for a lot of smaller businesses, especially.
It must
I
be
have seen it
fun
done.
too. Like, I love learning about businesses,
I do
even
too.
if they're all kind of dysfunctional. They're all like, "Oh, I'm sorry, we're dysfunctional." It's like I'm like, guys, trust me. I've seen like everyone's like you said. Is anyone doing it right? No, no one's doing it
Not really,
perfectly.
yeah.
Yeah,
Exactly. So let's all figure it out together, right?
yeah, exactly.
So we'd like to kind of leave with like going back to your crystal ball the next 5 to 10 years. What advice do you have for folks, especially the small, mid-sized folks, maybe they're only 5, 10 million, or maybe they're even 50 to 100 million. I think it's those guys that are in that like, low millions to 500 million, even up to a billion, you're still kind of in that pressure
Yeah,
situation of small to mid
yeah.
market. You can't go out and spend $1 million on consultants at, Deloitte Digital probably, right? Like,
I would say if your digital backbone is not in the cloud, you have to start planning for that.
okay.
I would say, and then do it in
Like
small
think about a
chunks and get
NetSuite or,
used to the idea of
yeah.
doing things in phases.
Yeah.
Try not, you talked about agile waterfall earlier. It's like you need to increment, you need to set like kind of annual goals. You need to be constantly investing to get better, and you will get the rewards of those investments over time. But there's certain structural things that you have to kind of building blocks. If they're not, I know future proof is not a great term, but the thing is, like, someone said to me, "Are you worried about AI?" And I said, if you're not completely already industry 4.0 ready, if you don't have business data in the cloud, you're not going to be able to leverage fully AI.
It's a
So
waste of your time.
AI makes
Like,
what we're doing even more relevant.
yeah.
That's what,
Yeah.
right?
Well, I think AI is especially relevant to improving data, right? It's a great
Right.
way to leverage data, modernize, maybe if you say, hey, here's my SKU, make the SKU better, you can probably, or normalize the taxonomy, like those are the things. But you still have to have the processes and the infrastructure that makes sense
Yeah.
to do any of like
You have to have good quality data at some point
Yeah.
that's getting dumped somewhere that you can analyze, right? And if it's stuck
Yeah.
in some on-prem system and it doesn't work
Yeah.
with APIs,
what would be like the first step? Like maybe they can't afford the full like jump in, do the whole thing, and where would you advise them to start if they're whatever flips?
talk to somebody, call in a consultant. We do a sales discovery. I'm sure you guys probably have something like this where it's just like, call me up on the phone, or call Isaiah, or call Timothy, call one of us up on the phone, give us a little bit of background, and you'll probably learn something just talking to us for
Yeah.
a half an hour, and it's
People
free.
will stay on your radar. Like we're happy to have those calls, and like we're not ERP
Yeah,
implementers, but I'll be like, here are the ones that I'm seeing that people are doing well. Then go talk to you guys that do NetSuite or whatever. Like, I think you're right. They need to start having these cloud-based
yeah.
ERP conversations, right?
And I think the rest of us need to talk about the wins. I think that, you know, when disruption's happening, people get scared. And I think if we can talk about like something that's gone well, or a win that we've had,
Yeah.
that kind of fills the sails with optimism, and then
Yeah.
people are more open to try things out, you know.
Yeah. I mean, I will say a lot of our wins, honestly, are with companies that are on NetSuite or cloud ERPs where we can leverage, a thing like Celigo, and we have, much more starting points to work with than trying to figure out some bespoke. I mean, we had this small company that came to us with this like custom bespoke ERP, and it's like, I mean, our quote was high. It was high because
Yeah,
we're
yeah,
gonna have to figure everything out for them, and they didn't
yeah.
give us. So it wasn't a win, but the wins I'm having are generally with the ones that have, are working with an agency going to the cloud or ERP cloud, and then we're helping them on kind of the front end, the e-com side.
And, I really do like, kind of wrapping on your note, Matt, that we should talk about our success stories.
Yeah.
There are a lot of success stories.
Yeah.
I think that we're always pointing out what can still be done, or, the
Yeah.
big issues or the crises, but there are a load of successes. I mean, otherwise, I don't think any of us would be doing what we're doing, for a career if there weren't successes. I mean, there really have been some great ones. And so,
and sometimes these projects, they're hard, they're hard, and they can be painful, and people don't come out of it necessarily like wanting to talk with Rosie, like, oh, rainbows and ponies, this was so amazing. It's like, nah, it was hard, but it's, it's going to be hard. That's the thing. You have to, like, I think that's the other thing is like maybe honesty and transparency. Like, this isn't going to be easy, but we're going to do it anyway. Because it's,
well, I think also people get too caught up on like the battle scars or whatever, like, and they also kind of like don't think, you need to kind of reflect and like, hey, maybe this is like a 5-year growing pain, right? To get to a modern ERP and B2B commerce solution with high adoption. But like once you get there, you're like, holy crap, or like it's amazing. But you look at like in the middle of it, you're like, oh, this is like tough, or they're not going to be, you know what I mean? Like you're kind of on the like in battle moments, and not like you reflect back, hey, we made it to Microsoft 365 and we're integrated with Magento or whatever. I'm just making that up as the guys that are stuck on great planes that eventually some of them will get there,
It's also how you earn your stripes in those relationships with those companies. Like, it can be a hard, painful process, and there's bumps along the way and scope creeps and all that we've had to deal with, right? But then if you can get to the other side, you've been through the battle with them, and they're like, you know what? I want you on my flank now for the future.
Yeah, I mean, I'll give you a quick kind of a win with those battle scars, like ton of scope creep. They know they need to move to cloud ERP, but they can't yet. For various reasons. I'm not gonna give away too much because like I don't want to break. It's an active client, but they were like, we need we got them eventually. It took years. They have all the features they need, and now it's like, all right, we can actually invest in marketing. Like they're running out of development to do because they're realizing like development's no longer the problem. It's now adoption and market. It's kind of exciting, right? It's like we're experimenting, like let's do a direct mail campaign combined with an email campaign offer combined with a sales rep offer. So this will be a great litmus test to see like how do we go after these customers for adoption across the whole, like your sales reps are talking to them. A mail,
you can finally
email,
put some gas in that race car you built,
exactly.
Right?
And I will say, like, the thing that they did that most companies don't do is they stuck through it. Like they paid through, we negotiated, we were like, look, we could have done better. We just partnered through the pain, and then you kind of like just eventually come out the other side. The people I think that have not done that are the ones that make the mistake. They try and look for, quick outs.
Yeah.
Instead of just kind of fighting through the scope creep or the struggles that come up.
Yeah. And I'll leave you with this. Like whenever I can meet somebody who's talking about this, I'm like, please talk to a partner agency or a consultant before you talk to the tech companies.
Oh
Because
God, yes.
if you
Yes.
go
Oh
through a
my
tech
God.
company sales cycle, they'll tell you everything is off the shelf. It's super easy. And this is why 65% of these implementations fail, because the expectations were never set right correctly up front.
Well, what people don't realize, and it's funny because for some reason, I find that a lot of times these people trust the tech salespeople, or they'll have a deeper relationship with the tech salespeople than they will with the agencies people like us. When our incentive is to make sure this project goes well, it's
Yes.
on budget. Because if I don't do that, like it hurts my reputation. That's how I make my money. What they don't understand
Right.
is the sales rep's just trying to sell the license.
Totally.
And all they care about is selling that license. And if the project fails, it doesn't matter. They still get paid on the 3-year license.
And
Or
they
they'll,
also, they also have whining and dining budgets. That's why
Yeah.
part of the reason that
yeah,
everyone
I
loves the
couldn't
sales
agree
rep.
more. And I don't think enough people spend enough time having honest conversations with the true vendors that are going to do the work, that
Yeah.
are in the trenches, making things happen. And,
You got to talk to the guys with the battle scars.
yeah,
They
exactly.
know where the landmines are.
Yeah, I
It's
think,
an old joke, but it really, it's a little off color, but I'll say it anyway because no one's going to stop me. But it's the line that they used to use in sales is like, you want to hire somebody who will tell you honestly how you look naked, right? And it's basically true though. It's you want the truth. It's like it's too risky not to have the truth in a lot of these business relationships with the amount of money that you're spending. So you want somebody to come in and say, no, that's not going to work, or oh, that's crap, or here's your problem. And that's the way it needs to go.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much. I think we went I think we're definitely going a longer.
I know. I could talk to you guys forever, man. This was so much fun.
We're gonna try and do like part 2s and bring people back. And so, because like you see, in a year from now, you'll have some new stories, we can kind of, how's your cloud adoption going, right? In a year, like, are you getting more people on NetSuite, right? Like, how are those GP people doing versus the 365 people?
Totally.
So
I'm going to sign off actually because I have somebody I'm zooming with in 2 minutes. So I better.
All right.
Yeah.
I'll let you guys get back to your Fridays. Yeah.
This is fantastic. This is really great.
Awesome. Thank you, Timothy.
Thank you.
All right. Bye, you guys.